Hey guys, Tom Davidson, Landon Hutchison back with Yardworks. Today we've got Tread Athletics. I know we're kind of beating you guys in the head here with pitching stuff. We think this is really important, the arm side of it. Tread Athletics is a little more unique than some of the other programs that are out there. They kind of take full scope of everything from the fitness side, training, game plans, all that kind of stuff. Garrison, why don't you jump in here, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, the founder, and then what you guys are really doing right now.
Sure. Yeah. So just to kind of piggyback off Thomas there. So yeah, we work with strength training, nutrition, all the throwing, right? And we give guys correctives and stuff after doing a full-on assessment through videos online. And majority of our clients are all remote. I think we have about 250, maybe a little bit more now, remote clients. So with that being said, like obviously there's a lot of work into that. I personally myself have around 90 athletes that I have to take care of. So it's like almost taking care of a whole team. But yeah, to just kind of introduce myself, how I got here and, just the crazy journey that baseball kind of takes you down. It's really cool. But obviously played baseball all through high school. Went to college at Winston Salem State, which is a Division II school here in North Carolina. And then from there, took on an internship at the Florida Baseball Ranch and attained my CSCS while I was there. Also went down, learned from Eric Cressey for a little bit for a few months as well, and his Jupiter location. And then from there, went to back to the Florida Baseball Ranch full time, and then just felt like I needed to move closer to home, so I picked up and got a pitching coach job at Limestone College, which is in South Carolina. And then met up with Ben for lunch because one of our pitchers was on Tread, and I just wanted to meet up with him and talk to him about some things. And he was like, "Hey, what do you feel about working for Tread Athletics?" And I was like, "That'd be awesome. I think I'd love that." So, and I was definitely missing the private sector side of things, because you get a little surprised at how much the NCAA can kind of regulate, like how much time you spend with the players. And I was like, I don't feel like I need to be limited in that. I want to make sure that the guys are doing, all that they can to reach and make their highest potential. So that's why I decided to, jump the ship from college to back to the private sector. So.
Nice. And then, so kind of dive into the scope of what Tread does
Yeah.
from, start to finish, fitness to, throwing patterns and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have several, I think 2 or 3 just outfielders or infielders. One guy in particular, Jalen Smith, that I worked with, he went to Kennesaw State, and he was like a middle infielder, second baseman, could hit it, could run, super athletic kid, but he just lacked the arm strength. And he's like, honestly, I think that's probably why I didn't get picked up by a team. He was invited by the Rangers and a bunch of other guys to go out there. I was like, well, listen, man, like, we do more than just guys that are up onto the mound. Like, we can help you with any type of arm strength, arm speed, just getting the arm action better. And he's honestly like one of my like most extreme testimonials, but he started out at like 79, 80 and jumped to 93 within the first 3 months of the program. Right. And that was like, he was already strong. So I'll give him that. Like, he already had a lot of good strength metrics. So that's probably why he made such a big jump. But just cleaning things up movement pattern wise through throwing, right? Like, and obviously he had some mobility constraints that we needed to take care of on the front end too. So like the first couple of months was like ironing out all those kinks, so to speak, in the kinetic chain. And then from there, we were able to see that kind of show up into his movement patterns. And obviously it's not going to translate right away, right? So like, he got the mobility taken care of, then he got the movement patterns down at a lower intensity. And then you started to on-ramp him into the more velocity phases, and that's where he took off, right? Because everybody thinks like, oh yeah, velocity development, like that's the first thing they're going to jump into. When in all reality, it's more like, hey, like, let's set yourself up. Can you even do these certain movements globally, right? Can you actually dissociate your pelvis from your torso, right? And vice versa. Can you, dissociate? And dissociation meaning, like, people say hip shoulder separation, like you can still have separation, but they're not working independently together as like segmentation. So just going to kind of go off on a tangent here. So think of it as like a spiral staircase, right? So you have like one stair that's here, the other one's here, the other one's there, right? And it just kind of continues to go up. And that's how really your pelvis and your spine all the way up to your shoulders need to act like, right? If they're moving together as one solid chunk, right, like this, that's where guys come up with the term no hip shoulder separation, right? But you got to take into account everything that's connecting the two, which is your spine, right? Everything's driven through your spine. That's where your spinal cord is, how everything's just kind of driven off from there, right? So to keep all that in check, like everybody's like, oh yeah, just check your thoracic spine, you'll be good. But you got to take into account cervical spine and lumbar spine too, right? So there's a lot of things that we try to get as thorough as possible, especially in the remote capacity of things. Like obviously we can't put our hands on them, but we try to check off as many boxes as we can to look at all those things and say, hey, these are possible contributors, or this is definitely a red flag. And then, you know, we assign certain correctives and even modify the throwing drills in a way that best fits what they or how they move. So
on the tread side, you guys are you're taking a guy, whether they're on the bump or in the field, and breaking down every motion they have to just create this a very detailed, you know, phrase of how we get you from here to where you need to be so you can get some extra velo.
Exactly. Yeah. And some guys, they come to us and they're like, and we ask them straight out of the gate, we're like, hey, what are your goals? Like, what are you trying to accomplish on this program? Right. And they're like, oh, well, you know, I'm trying to, you know, be a starter. I'm trying to go play Division I. I'm like, all right, cool. So throughout this entire 6 to 12-month, you know, program, that's usually what guys sign up for us with. I'm like, we'll hold you accountable to that. Right. So if you're not filling out your charts, you're not doing all this stuff to line up to what you want to get at with where your goals are, then, you know, we'll kind of call you out on it. Right. It's like, it's a little bit different than, you know, if you guys get to see them in person, you can kind of like, hey man, like make sure you're doing your stuff. Like we just necessarily, like, we can check in on the guys, but we don't know until they send in their charts and actually be able to see like what they're doing. So we're like, hey, like, you know, this is on track of where we need to be. If you're not quite matched up to that yet, then we're like, hey, like, you know, let's try to nail this down, whether that's the nutrition side of things and they're not tracking their macros, or even on the other side of that, if they're, you know, just seem very fatigued and their performance is going down, we're like, all right, well, do we need to take a deload week from training aspect, or are you having other stresses such as like finals, things like that? Because stress is stress, right? Like the brain is only going to identify stress, whether it's physical stress, mental stress, you broke up with your girlfriend, right? Like all that is going to be interpreted the same through the brain. So you kind of have to take in a lot of those things, and you're like, all right, like this is why the athlete's, you know, reacting this way, and you have to modify the program going forward from there just to see how they react and things like that. Because it's not something where you're just like, oh, hey, here's, you know, our program, you can do this, you'll succeed, see ya. No, like there's constant checkups and calls, video calls like this, or FaceTime calls where we're checking in on, they send in video regularly, right? So we have to constantly check on them because, you know, it's not always going to be linear progress, right? There's going to be some twists and turns and things in there that are, you know, frank, like you got to learn how to adapt and adjust to continue to keep progressing towards your goals.
Seems like there's a lot of benchmarks and stuff that you guys would have to meet. And I know the ranch style of their evaluations, it's like a red's bad, yellow's decent, green's good. What are some of the most common things that you've come across, just like one or two that would lead to someone that doesn't look like they have good hip shoulder separation? What's one factor that if someone was just watching a kid, or their mom and dad was just watching their son pitch or throw, what's one thing that you're like, man, I feel like if he did this, it would help him, you know, get a little bit more on it?
Yeah, I would say outside of really hip shoulder separation, it's, again, everybody's a little bit different, but I'd say the most common one is just overall arm action, either soft tissue range of motion or things like that. Like guys who you see them throw and they're like here, or they're really late, like kind of similar to what Rand's ideas were, right? Like if you're here and you're very late with all of this, obviously you could either be restricted due to your pec and all this, or you just have like super rounded shoulders from, sitting at a desk playing video games all day. I've written an article about that too. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you got to make sure that you're getting in this position, being aware of your posture as you're going through that. Cause so like guys who are on their cell phone constantly, things like that, that definitely affects how their posture is, right? So they're going to have these rounded shoulders. That I think is probably one of the biggest things I'm seeing lately. Obviously, in terms of just overall general performance, some guys, they don't know how to load their back leg in order to get everything going forward. So what they do is they compensate and they, overextend or like jump or leap with their back leg, right? So those would probably be some of the most common ones that I would see. But again, like you have to ask your question of, are they throwing this way because they're physically tight in these regions, or are they tight because they throw this way? Are they sore after a game because they throw a certain way, right? So like if you get sore after a game and say, hey, like I get sore right here in your lat, okay, that kind of like shines a light to where we need to look at. And we're like, okay, hey, if you're sore here, let's look at your decel pattern, or let's see how your arm action is. Or actually one of the more interesting cases was a guy said, hey, I'm sore in my calf every time after I'm throw. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Watch a video of him. Sure enough, jumps off of his back leg, right? So I'm like, I mean, you kind of know what it already is, but the thing is some guys really don't know how to like basically put it down and attack it through drills or through more practical ways to get it done every day. So,
all right, I'm sitting here, I'm playing video games all day. What's a couple things that I can do, while I'm playing video games or, texting or whatever, I'm in class? What's a couple drills or something I could do that could help relieve those sagging shoulders?
Yeah. So if you're sitting here and you realize you kind of catch yourself that you're just hunched over like this, right? Let's say you're playing Fortnite or COD, whatever, right? And then you die. You're like, all right, come up here, give you some little thoracic extension going right there. Right. So if you're going sideways, basically just look back like this. You could add in some rotation, or you could even play standing up too. Some guys, especially whenever they get super excited, they're like, they get real antsy. So then they start to stand up. And I'm totally for that. Like if you sit all the time, your hip flexors, things like that, that's going to show up in your movement assessment for everything to be super tight. So don't spend so many hours of just sitting in one particular position, because your body's going to adapt to that, right? Because regardless of whatever the stress you're putting on it, it's going to try to, protect itself either way. So get up, move around, or maybe take a break after every hour, do some mobility drills that you might have already known, or, we got a lot of free stuff on our website that you guys could definitely take advantage of too. Which I can talk about that a little bit later, but
yeah, Garrison,
that's what I would do.
When you get a new client, how long, like what's the process? How long does it take for them to get, hey, these are my goals. You guys go through that. Here's a video, maybe doing front side, back side, side action. How long does it take you to go from getting, a new client on board remotely or in-house, I guess, and then creating this whole process for them?
Yeah. So our typical turnaround is about 48 hours from the day they sign up to them filling out the questionnaire of like all these questions, right? And then they shoot all the videos. So once all their videos are complete, all their forms and things are filled out, then they would shoot that over to us. And then from there, we assess it, and that'll take us 48 hours to go through everything, kind of format it, get the correctives, get the throwing drills, get the nutrition program set up. And then from there, we send that over to them. Then we have like a one-on-one, either FaceTime call or video call. And then we go through and just kind of walk them through everything. And we're like, all right, like, here's your plan. This is what you got going on for this month, right? Here's the bigger overview of like, hey, if you're trying to gain weight, over the next, let's say you're trying to gain 10, 15 pounds of muscle mass. Of course, you can't gain all of that in 1 month. So we break that down and we're like, all right, so for this month, you're going to gain 6 pounds. This following month, you're going to gain 4, right? So that's 10 right there. Then the next one, you gain 4 to 5 more pounds from there. And again, they're not always going to be linear with that, but that's just kind of how we run them through everything. But yeah, we have a lot of video links set up for that too. Obviously, like we can't have, just a big list of a bunch of exercises. We're like, get it personalized to where they only need to look at the videos that they need to look at, so they don't get confused and have too much information, and go from there.
How much would it cost as far as 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 12 months? I'm assuming that the longer that they're with you, it's probably a little bit better, more bang for your buck.
Yeah, with anything. And again, we like to have guys with us for more of the long term, because we know the more we stick with them, the better they'll be able to refine their processes and things like that. And it really depends on each guy's situation, right? So like, let's say you're a college guy and, you already have your college team already has a certain program set up for you and things like that. But you want to make sure that you're nailing down the summer, Christmas break, things like that. So we can customize the packages based on each guy's need. And then, as far as pricing and things goes like that, it really kind of depends on, do you want the full package of the strength training, the nutrition, right, the throwing, all that stuff? And do you want additional mechanical support, right? So some guys, like, they want to send in videos regularly, like once or twice a week. So obviously that's going to be a little bit more expensive. And then, if you wanted to take out the strength training or take out the nutrition, there would be a lower tier package for that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So obviously that'll range anywhere from probably three to 400, based on each package.
I mean, who doesn't want a coach for all that stuff? Who doesn't want a coach for that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
I know I would do so much better at the gym if I had like a plan from a pro that just tells me, this is what we're doing today. If you want to get to this point, I mean, you go in there and more times than not, when you're going through that stuff, you're just going through the motion. You're comfortable with what you're doing and where you're at. I think these guys, need to understand that to get to that next level, it's more than just going out and long tossing or going to the gym or eating healthy. You kind of have to have this all encompassing, thought process behind it to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. And there's a huge difference in knowing, like, with us, it's one guy and we're taking care of all these things, versus if you go to just a nutritionist, like you're paying $200 a month for there. If you go to, and then you have a strength coach on top of that, that's another 100, 150, depending on the guy. Then you go do pitching lessons, right? Like that adds up to probably, $600-$700 a month if you, kind of get the best of the best, information out there and sign up through all those things individually. So we're just kind of like more of like, hey, this is a one-stop shop. And obviously we're like, we want to have conversations with the guys and not say like, hey, it's this way or the highway. Like, give us some feedback and let us know how you're feeling, and be like, hey, I don't necessarily like this drill, or I don't know if I'm gaining any range of motion over the past few weeks after doing this, right? Like, again, they teach us just as much as we teach them about things, but it's really like, like you said, having a plan to stick with, knowing that, especially I wish I had something like this growing up, because, we kind of had to figure some things out on our own and like experiment and, try to search out and look for other things, whether it was reading some blog posts, watching some other YouTube videos, and then we're like, okay, well, we got some of this information. But even nowadays, I honestly would be so lost if I was a player right now, because there's so much information out there, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, right? Like everybody's claiming that they have this one way that's going to fix everything, or some formula out there that's going to just, make you gain all the miles per hour. And that's not necessarily always the case, right? Like I'll even say myself, I don't have it all figured out. And I'd take it as more of a journey with each player. Be like, hey, like, let's see what works for you and what doesn't work, right? So it's never saying like, hey, this is the only way to do it. But, you also, there is some trial and error too on how we get to go about things and finding out what works for each individual athlete.
Through your experience, Garrison, have you noticed, I have a little bit on my end just at the collegiate level, but have you noticed that a lot of guys' major issues, like if they're filling out this questionnaire, it's going to be like a pain thing? hey, I've got, like you said, my shoulder hurts after I get done throwing. So does that help you narrow down and kind of really hone in on what guys really need to work on to make sure that they're where they need to be?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you definitely want to start especially if any guys having pain, or some guys even start with us right after their surgeries. They're like, hey, I've been released to throw. Now what do I do? We're like, all right, well, first off, we can't like jump and start throwing, doing shuffle running throws or anything like that. Like, there's a progressive plan that we have to go to slowly add the workload, slowly add the intensity to get you where you need to be, right? But if you do have pain in any region, right, first off, like I said, you got to look, hey, are you tight because, you're just physically tight and you don't have that mobility or range of motion, or because you're throwing a certain way, you're causing your body to tighten up and basically kind of provide more of like your body creates this human stent that I like to call, right? Like if you have a constant like banging on your arm and you're getting sore on the posterior shoulder, there's going to be a lot of scar tissue and stiffness back in here because your body is trying to protect itself, right? And your body is wanting to survive, and it's going to choose survival over performance every time, right? So whether it's, you throwing at an elite level velocities or just surviving because of the amount of food that you're eating, right? So, and that's where a lot of guys are like, hey, how am I supposed to lose weight if I start eating more? Well, if you eat less, your body's going to retain, all of this body fat because it doesn't know when the next time it's going to eat. So it's going to hold on to it and be like, hey, we got to save this for later because we don't know when we're going to eat next, right? But then they eat more, and then your body's like, oh, hey, I don't really need to hold on to this stuff anymore. So you start to lose the fat, you start to lose all this stuff. Same thing happens with the throwing arm, right? So you're going through here and, you're not getting any of this bang or anything like that. So it's going to stop getting stiff. It's going to stop getting sore in those areas because it doesn't feel threatened and it doesn't feel like it has to protect anything because you're dissipating the energy correctly and more efficiently.
There's a lot of parents out there that you'll hear, and it really brings it's like a cringe-worthy thing of hearing them say it, but they'll say, my son, he just needs to have Tommy John surgery. His elbow's always hurting. I think he just needs Tommy John. He'll throw harder because he got Tommy John surgery, or he needs shoulder reconstructive surgery because his shoulder is always hurt. No, there's something going on is why that you're hurting. So you need to fix those things because just like a kid has Tommy John, there's a reason why he had Tommy John surgery. Yes, it is a very aggressive, sport that we play, and it's not great, but at the same time, it's either overuse or you're doing it wrong. There's two options pretty much. So have you guys noticed that as well?
Yeah, I think the surgery is not the answer to everything, right? Like there's definitely things that you can avoid and certain things that you have to just manage workload wise to make sure that you're not jumping over those thresholds. Or even let's just say outside of surgery where guys are like, hey, like if you just rest, or if you take a few weeks off, that's going to fix everything. Not necessarily, because you're going to have the same bad movement patterns, or maybe even worse when you come back and start to throw. So you have to address those starting out, right? Making sure you're cleaning up those movement patterns where you don't have these, elbow issues or shoulder issues, whatever it might be, right? So you have to clean that stuff up. Will it entail you maybe taking some, a few weeks off, maybe, right? So like, it totally depends on the guy. Obviously, we're in a little bit of a different situation nowadays with the whole COVID situation. So people's seasons are kind of came to a halt. So everybody's like, oh, hey, it's the off season now. But again, you got to take into account, hey, how much were you throwing beforehand? And from there, you kind of have to formulate the plan. All right, should we shut down or should we continue to start throwing and go forward, right? But yeah, for the parents who say like they just need surgery though, like honestly, a lot of guys come out worse on the other end of that because they might throw harder, but it's because of all the other rehab and things like that that got them stronger, which was what they were lacking in the first place. And that's why they were coming back throwing harder, because they took the time to slow down, not play a bunch of games, not continue to throw through pain, and they actually took it more seriously. that's where all that improvement actually came from, not necessarily the surgery itself.
Do you have a view on maybe what the proper amount of time to build up before these guys really go into a full game mode would be? Because we're kind of facing that right now where
Sure.
it looks like maybe we might start some tournaments in early June. It could be July. We don't know. But if, say, it's, June 1, what kind of time frame do these guys really need to get through, the proper number of bullpens or long toss, things like that before they get into a live game situation?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And again, I would ask you, how much has the athlete been throwing beforehand? If they've literally thrown like hardly at all since then, and then you're trying to say, hey, we're trying to get to game ready like next month, you're like, all right, like that's pretty aggressive. We can make it happen. But, I would say if you took time off, it's going to take you just about the exact same amount of time off to get you back to where you were before you took off, right? So if you were already game ready and you took 4 weeks off, then it's going to take you 4 weeks to get back to where you were beforehand. And then from there, like you want to refine some things. Maybe you want to work on pitch design, right? Or you're trying to work on your off speed or your changeup, or just work on command in general, right? And you want to have and allot some extra time to work on those things before you jump into a game. You got to plan ahead for that as well. But in general, I would say it takes about, a 4 to 6 week on-ramping process. Some guys can progress and jump forward a lot faster than others. But again, to be on the safe side, like however much time you took off, you need that exact amount of time to on-ramp back up.
These people that are out there, Garrison, where are they going to find you? You got Instagram, Twitter, Tread. Where do we find you guys?
Yeah, so you can find us treadathletics.com, tread_athletics on Instagram, and then just Tread Athletics at Twitter. That's Ben's handle. My handles are Royal Performance. It's with a 4, so ROYALPER4MANC. But yeah, feel free to go on our website. We have a lot of free stuff there for you guys. So if you go to products and then free downloads, we got a free metric analysis tool, free 21 weight gain challenge. Feel free to take advantage of that. And also a free 4-week on-ramping throwing process as well, which will be coming out pretty soon. A few other ones that I think I'm forgetting, and you can download the first 2 chapters of Ben's ebook on the website as well. And if you're interested in working with us, feel free to shoot us an email at contact @treadathletics.com.
Perfect. Hey man, we appreciate you coming on there. Hopefully we get to see some of these guys play soon, but if not, I mean, there's so many guys that could really benefit from some of this stuff, just getting mechanics right and getting healthy and things like that I think it's important to point that out and get those guys on there, at least take a peek and see if it fits for you or not.
Absolutely. And we can still work with guys even when they're in season 2. We can arrange the program calendar based off of how many games that they're playing. So we're like, hey, I'm playing games in this tournament this weekend. I'm like, all right, cool. So we'll make sure that you're lifting during the week and that your throwing schedule is lined up to where you're ready to rock and roll once you hit the field.
Perfect. Hey, thanks for coming on with us. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one.